You know, when I initially started the script, it was going to be the third part of my Problems with Yu-Gi-Oh! Girls, where I talked about the girls of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5d's. So, as you would imagine, I decided to go back to watch the original series, but as I was watching, I had a thought when I saw the main female lead, Aki Izayoi, and the idea for a video essay began to sprout in my head. And since I want to talk more about specific characters this year in my videos, I figured this would be probably a good place to start. That's the thing with writing scripts for videos that I've noticed nowadays. The more I write them, the more time I put into them, the more ideas I get. It's almost like I'm a proper YouTuber at this point. I'm even starting to hurt for money like a proper one too. So what is it about this red-headed girl from a 14-year-old anime about card games and playing them on motorcycles that I find to be fascinating? Well, watch and we'll find out. And maybe we'll go back to a character I've talked about in the past, and how they pale in comparison to Aki. So give me a few minutes, and I'll be glad to tell you the tragedy of Aki Izayoi. So before I can actually talk about this character in length, I think it's important to establish the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D so we're all on the same page. Again, this is a show that's about 14 years old about card games. A small refresher is actually necessary for this sort of niche content, especially if you don't know who this character is, which, you know, is actually a thing that's possible nowadays. God, I'm an old coot. Our story takes place in two locations, Neo Domino City and Satellite, two very different cities that were built upon the remains of the original Domino City, a location that old-school Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans would recognize as the hometown of Yugimoto. The two cities are two sides of the same coin, connected but completely different. Neo Domino City is essentially what you'd call Utopia. It's for the upper crust of society and can be viewed as a technologically advanced location, as it should be, where the citizens are often watching writing duels, basically for entertainment. Satellite, on the other hand, is literally a dump. Yeah, not kidding. It's literally a dump where the inhabitants are essentially serfs and are treated as much as garbage as the trash they sleep with, work with, and I think you get the point. In the earlier seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, the show really makes it a point to show that there's an obvious class system going on, as well as showing a dystopian future, at least if you're in Satellite. Satellite is also treated as a prison for those who broke the law and are given a criminal mark, which is something that can be used to identify lawbreakers and can even be used to track down criminals. And to make it clear, yes, if you have a mark, you are discriminated against. Even the silly dub version of the show makes it a point of that discrimination.
Should we wake him up? I don't know. Look at that marker on his cheek. What about it? Remember that weirdo who used to clean the pool? When Dad came home and saw that guy had a mark on his cheek, he fired him. Dad said that mark meant he was in the facility. So you think this guy was in the facility too? Cool. That's not cool, you dork.
So, now that we have an idea of what the world is like, but what about the story? Well, the main story of the first season follows the stoic Yusei Fudo, a young man who was born and raised in Satellite who's not only a genius with the card game Duel Monsters, but also a pretty damn good mechanic. His goal is to go after Jack Atlas, known as the King of Duelists, and a former friend of Yusei before he stole not only the D-Wheel that Yusei built to bring joy to his friends, but also stole Stardust Dragon. Both the D-Wheel and the card were very important to Yusei and his friends, as it represented their hope of getting out of Satellite one day, and Jack stole them. Now, you may be wondering what this has to do with Aki. Yusei, Jack, and Aki are all a part of a group called the Signers, people who are connected with an ancient deity known as the Crimson Dragon. There's said to be 5 of them, and each have a mark on their arms that glows, even through clothes at times. And they're said to have a very conjoined destiny with each other. And I think that's enough to give you guys context about the world so you have an idea of the basic premise. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, at least in the first arc, had a utopian society with a dark underbelly that people pushed out of their minds for the sake of, you know, convenience. Discrimination is actually a very big key theme in the first season, and for an anime about card games, that's something I found really interesting as a premise for a series that had previously had vampires, furry simps, aliens, and evil gestalt being of light that wanted to brainwash people with a satellite cannon. GX was a hell of a drug. But now that we have the foundation of the world, I think it's time we talk about the actual character of this video. Aki Izayoi, or as the normies who only watch the dub would say, Akiza Izinski. What the hell is with that name, Akiza? Not worth it. Not worth it at all. So, who is Aki Izayoi? Well, she's debatably one of the most fleshed out female characters in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm not talking about her figure and oddly sexualized outfits. I mean, you tell me what I'm supposed to think when she's wearing a garter belt, and don't get me started on her rider suit. She is just poured into that. In any case, the reason why Aki is probably the best female character in all of Yu-Gi-Oh!, at least to me, is because of the fact that she has such a different premise to her character and they actually followed through with it in the writing. And it's a great example of using tragedy for a character. Before I get into that, I need to point out something about Yu-Gi-Oh! 5d's and that this series was geared towards a more mature audience. Yes, I know this series with the whole
card games on motorcycles
is a meme. Thanks, little Karibo.
Doctor, you have to save him! Quick, inject him with 40 cc's of friendship!
But in all honesty, Yu-Gi-Oh! 5d's, at least the original Japanese version, covered a lot of topics. Stuff like unfair class systems, systematic oppression, evil cults, the amazing Crashtown series, and for the purposes of Aki here, abandonment, loneliness, those taking advantage of those in weak times, and just wanting to be loved. Yeah, I'm not hiding my bias here. I legit think that Aki Izayoi, at least in the earlier seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5d's, is probably the best written and most intriguing female character in Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's all the series. And I believe that we haven't gotten one as compelling as her ever since. So, why is she compelling? Well, to start off, Aki is what you would call a psychic duelist. In the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5d's, psychic duelists have the ability to make the damage that's inflicted in duels become real, and it started up when she was around 8 years old. You see, Aki comes from a rather wealthy family. In fact, her father was a powerful senator in Neo-Domino City, and as a result, he couldn't spend a lot of time with his family. Work came first, even more to the point where he had to miss her birthday. So when Aki, for the first time in a long time, was able to actually play with her father in a friendly game of duel monsters, sees her father taking a call and learning that he'd have to end the duel midway, that's when Aki's powers in the Dragon Mark manifested. And when that happened, well...
Papa! Why, Papa! Papa! あなた化け物
Again, to clarify, Aki was 8 years old when this happened, so learning you had these powers, badly hurting your father with them, and to be called a monster by your father, that can have some traumatic repercussions, especially when you consider that after that her powers kept growing out of control. She even summoned a giant plant monster that attacked other kids. And then... 8 years old once more. And this is some heavy stuff, especially for a Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Like, I know we got stuff like having buzzsaws cutting off your legs at the ankles, and being abused with a tattoo being burned into your back and hitting an Egyptian pharaoh, but unlike that stuff, this just seems a lot more real down to earth. Like, sure, you got the supernatural psychic powers, and the economy that features a heavy influence from a card game, but the stuff that caused those powers to be born is something you can actually see happening in the real world. A neglected child developing a power that she can't control and effectively being shunned for it, not just by her parents, but her peers, society even. Even when her father forced her into Duel Academy and okay, I think the dual disc towers are a bit much. Even though she was going to Duel Academy, her powers were still uncontrollable. And she even attacked some other students. And when she ran back home, she came to find her family happy without her in their lives. And then, something snapped.
Papa は笑ってた。だったら私も笑ってあげる。この力を解放して笑ってあげる。
So, in comparison to the main female leads of the previous two series that I covered, Anzu and Asuka, you've already got a character with a far more compelling backstory, with a hint of tragedy to it. You've already got a good setup for a compelling character right there. So, what's the next step? So, let's talk about exploitation. To make sure we're on the same page, exploitation is essentially taking advantage of others for your own gain. Simple, no? It's a concept we see every day in our real world, and it comes in many different forms. Guilt-tripping people to do things that aid you, underpaying workers, or even YouTubers who take advantage of their audiences.
Irrelevant!
Regardless of where it comes from, exploitation is a very serious subject, and in media, it's a topic that needs to be discussed and showcased so people can learn the science of exploiters. So, enter Divine. He's the leader of what is called the Arcadia Movement. It's essentially an organization that's dedicated to helping those with psychic powers. As it turns out, Aki isn't the only one who's been discriminated against for these weird powers of hers. There are others in it. Divine happens to be one of them as well, although in his own words, he's not as strong as Aki. Divine appeared before Aki in a time of need. The young girl was essentially homeless, and had a good reason to think that her parents hated her, and had a power that essentially made her dangerous to others. A lot of people accept any hand that reaches out to them, especially when they're going through hard times. It's why you see a lot of people getting wrapped up in scams with promises of great returns. I'm willing to bet that a lot of people who are watching this right now have at least once in their lives been exploited by someone else, especially during a hard time. And more than likely, it was by someone we trusted. Whether it be family members, a good friend, or even someone who was in a higher position than us. I know I've been exploited by someone in my past. And that's what Divine is. To Aki, he's a man who managed to help her get off the street, helped her control her powers, and was trying to help other psychic duelists so they wouldn't face the same discrimination as her. That was a mask though. Yes, he does help Aki, but this man's goal is to use her. Divine's main goal was to create an army of psychic duelists, and overthrow the current government and leaders of Neo Domino City and move on to bigger plans. Divine's goal was to make Aki into a weapon, so he could gain power, under the guise of wanting to take away the pain that she had been experiencing up to that point.
Divine. ここにいなさい。辛いことは考えなくていい。私が考えてあげるから、アキ。お前は本来のお前のまま、ただいればいいんだよ。ディバイン。私はディバインに導かれていればよかった。
Aki was willing to throw away her own personal agency because someone was willing to accept her. She may be dangerous with her powers, but she's still a human. And humans tend to be fragile, looking to make the pain go away.
考えを預けるな。お前自身で考えるんだ。魔女の私が何を考える。ディバインが私を導いて愛してくれればそれで。
He loves you, huh? This is what enthralled me about this character. Aki is a broken person. Just because she has a power that she can't control, she still reaches out for someone. Anyone to take her hand and to help her. It's just unfortunate the first hand she took was that of a man who simply saw her as a tool and manipulated her shattered emotions to turn her into a weapon for his own desires. She was a puppet.
許せ。お前も私を助けてる。そう、唯一私をこの世で受け入れてくれたのはディバインだけ。彼だけが私に居場所を与えてくれた。
It's not the best written, and I do have my issue with how it's wrapped up, even more so with Aki's development in the later half of the show's run. But for the purposes of this video, this is how you use a tragic backstory for a character, and actually use it in your story, while at the same time making sure you're informing your audience that this is a cautionary tale of tragedy and how vulnerable people can be when facing extreme hardships. And how, even after all this, you still have a chance to be saved. So while this video is talking about tragedy, I feel as though I should talk about the resolvement of it, at least in some part. If it's not clear, this video is spoiler heavy, so if you're just here for a recommendation and like anime with card games, I do suggest at the very least, the first 2 arcs up to the end of the Dark Signer arc, and later on the Crashdown arc for Yu-Gi-Oh! 5d's. But try to avoid the dub. Not only is the voice acting and script very...
Uh-oh, you stole my bug. Yeah, ever since that roach nested in his ear, he freezes up if you just say the word insect. I sure hope this doesn't throw him off his game. Come on, Use. You can do this.
God, Use? That's as annoying as Tristan Taylor voicing Yusei.
If I get out-dueled down here, I may never get another chance to settle the score with Jack. And Jack will never have to answer for what he did. I can't let that happen.
Look, there are unnecessary changes to names, the censorship of scenes, and for some reason padding up the episodes with summaries of what the cards do. And of course, making scenes worse by adding more dialogue when it's not needed. You're better off going sub for this, especially since it keeps the serious nature of the show intact. I don't know why they even bothered trying to dub this series. I mentioned in the last section that no matter how small or how bleak a situation is, you can still be saved. And while Divine's hand was reached out to Aki with the intent of just using her, eventually another hand reached out to her, and that hand belonged to Yusei.
彼女のカードをどう読んだ？拒絶と怒りか。だが、まだ何かが潜んでいる。
To be frank, when the two first actually meet,
見るべき印だ。なぜ見るべき印だ？あざはお前にとって何なんだ？私はこの印を持つ者を憎む。嫌悪する。
Yusei had more of an interest with the mystery of the marks on the signer's arms, including Aki, and not to mention, his friends are being held hostage to get Yusei to participate in a tournament to draw out the signers. So, Yusei doesn't really start with a goal of helping Aki, and Aki doesn't really care to listen to anyone either. At this point, she's pretty much enthralled by Divine's silky words and promises of a brighter future for psychic duelists. She's a puppet on strings, but Yusei knows there's an obvious connection between the signers and knows what's being planned can't be good, since they're obviously going to be used for something by these people in power, the same people that kidnapped Yusei's friends and holding them hostage right now.
このあざは確実に俺たちをつないでいる。奴らはそれに気づき、俺たちを利用しようとしているのか。イザヨイを取り巻くあの連中も、結局シグナーとしての彼女。俺たちは利用されてはいけない。そのためにも彼女の閉ざされた心、それをこじ開け、本当のイザヨイに会わなければ。
And during their first duel against each other, it seems as though Aki is taking a sick pleasure and was essentially torturing Yusei, and even Yusei seems to think that she gets enjoyment out of destruction.
お前は破壊を、その力を楽しんでいる。その力に優越を感じている。私が破壊を楽しんでる。
But as the duel continues onwards, there's something more beneath the surface.
そうよ。その通りよ。私は魔女。痛みを与えて、それを喜ぶ恐ろしい女。楽しいわ。私を孤独に追いやるすべての者どもに、私の力によって痛みを与えるのが本当に楽しい。楽しんでいる。だが、その喜びを彼女自身は。
After summoning his ace, Stardust Dragon, we learn that under the joy of hurting those who put her in isolation, that there's a great deal of self-loathing within Aki. So much so that Aki created the Black Rose Witch persona that allowed her to feel joy when she hurts others. That she didn't want to think about the pain and suffering that her own pain caused, and allowing Divine to take the burden of thinking from her. She's fine with that, so long as she doesn't have to feel those emotions. And as Yusei said, that's running away from the problem. And even though Aki acknowledges that, she says there's nothing she can do. Because of her situation, Aki has to retreat into herself and don the mask of the witch that she created. I don't want to give a play-by-play of the duel, however, since that's not really entertaining, and I'm not a DJ with really long pompadour hair, but needless to say, things escalate in the duel to the point where Aki summons her ace, Black Rose Dragon, and attempts to destroy the field with it. And at the same time, with her psychic powers, create a lot of actual damage. Funnily enough, Stardust Dragon Yusei's ace has the ability to cancel out these abilities, and does so by wrapping Black Rose Dragon in its wings. If anything, this sort of acts as though someone lashing out against someone who's trying to stop them from doing something that'll hurt not only others, but will continue to hurt themselves. It's also kind of awkward. I don't know, I always thought that Black Rose Dragon was blushing when another dragon with six-pack came up to her and wrapped his wings around her. And it's during this moment that Yusei takes the victory and stops Aki from hurting the stadium full of people, all the while breaking that facade that Aki was using to protect herself. Of course, before Yusei can say anything else, the crowd then cheers at the witch's defeat, saying that she deserved that. When you really think about it, both Aki and Yusei have a similar backstory. They're both rejected based upon things they can't really change. Aki with her powers and Yusei being satellite trash and now a criminal. Yes, the discrimination and suffering they faced is quite different, but they both still faced some serious hardship that was out of their control. And because of this duel, a hand was reached out to Aki, a hand of kindness and understand, with no actual malice behind a false face. And while it would take a while for that hand to be extended to her again, eventually Yusei does indeed reach out to pull Aki out of the darkness that she was using to protect herself. A rose protected by thorns.
Izayoi. Aki.
Now I will say that this part of Aki's arc is a little rushed, especially with her reconciling with her parents, but hey, it's still a heartwarming scene to me, and really cemented how much I cared for this character. An anime whose main goal is to showcase cards for a game managed to do a superb job of crafting an excellent backstory for a character and genuinely got me to care for her. That's worth some measure of respect to me.
Papa. Aki. 優勢終わらせてお願いこの戦いを今こそ魔女の呪縛を打ち破れスターダストドラゴンでブラックローズドラゴンを攻撃シューティングソニック
You don't have anything smart to say now, do you?
Get the hell away from her, man. Stop harassing my friends.
You don't have any friends.
Like you know. You're not even a real cop. You're a fucking security guard.
I was a soldier, Chloe.
Now that I've basically talked about the positives and highlights of how I feel about a tragic backstory should be used, and while those actions Aki did were bad, she still hurt others and acknowledged what she was doing was wrong, but the mentality was a broken girl who was being used by a terrible person and was lashing out against a world that was completely unfair to her. Simple, right? Well, now I want to take a look and compare to what I feel is a bad tragic character.
I gotta blame somebody, otherwise it's all my fault. Fuck that.
Look, I'm well aware that last year was the year of Life is Strange beat-em-ups on this channel, and I'd be lying if I didn't want to keep that up. It was quite lucrative for my channel. But here's the thing. I do have future plans to cover the original Life is Strange, not just one character, in a full video on its own. Boiling down my opinion of a game based around one character is not what I want to be known for, and I feel as though I should at least be fair to a game that a lot of people seem to hold in high regard. Although, I still don't like Chloe, so let's take a moment and talk about this. If you're not familiar with Chloe Price, she's the second lead in the 2015 game Life is Strange. I'm not going to go full-on analysis with her character, as I've already made a 46-minute video on this topic, as you can see here. But for those who don't want to click off, here's what we need to know for this video. Chloe has had tragedy in her life. Her father died when she was young, and her best friend Max left almost immediately after that. Chloe is a punk. Her friend Max came back and now has time manipulation powers that the two use and abuse. Chloe's other friend and possible lover, Rachel Amber, has gone missing and Chloe is looking for her. Chloe's stepfather, David, is a former soldier and she doesn't get along with him. Chloe is a drug user. And Chloe is a terrible character. Again, if you want more details, check out my video dedicated to this, but let's start with a commonality between Chloe and Aki, the basic home life. These are similar scenes to both these characters. Both are meant to evoke sympathy towards them in question, and as well as show how terrible the father figures are in their lives, whether they be doing it on purpose or be an accident.
あなたパパはどうして私をぶつの私が普通の子じゃないから私が
Stop treating me and my mom like we're your family platoon!
Hey! Leave Joyce out of this!
I wish you'd leave Joyce! Like now!
Chloe, I'm sorry. I care about your mother and you just keep pushing me.
Don't touch me again, asshole. That's the last time! Or I'll bring the cops in here so fast!
You're not that dumb.
I'd be smart to have you busted.
Chloe, someday you'll grow up.
But when you add a bit more context to both scenes, you can see why this version with Aki is more powerful to me, while at the same time not degrading her character in the process. The reason why David confronted Chloe was because one of his guns is missing, and he was suspicious of her taking it. Now, this isn't a justification for slapping someone, I have to make that clear, but the reason why this was a problem was that David was right in his suspicions. And throw in the fact we get this gem of a scene later.
It's not even loaded. Yet.
I thought you believed in gun control.
Yes, I believe I should control the gun. It's the men who need to be checked. Goodbye, cruel bumper. Jesus, I shot myself!
It's clear that Chloe shouldn't have a gun in her possession. She's more than likely going to kill herself or...
You fucking killed my dog!
Oh my god!
Yeah. The slap scene loses a fair bit of sympathy when David was right to be concerned with Chloe holding on to what is essentially a deadly weapon that she can use to hurt not only herself but others too. Aki's scene is a lot more sympathetic because, well, when it happens, she's just a little girl who honestly doesn't know any better and is acting on her developing emotions when she attacked other kids with her psychic powers. Another parallel is justification. Both Aki and Chloe do bad things. Aki has attacked people with her powers on purpose and will lash out against those who do want to help her. Meanwhile, Chloe is pretty much a bitch to people, including the people who do care about her. The two have more parallels than you'd think about it. Chloe lost not only her father a few years ago when she was a teenager, but her best friend moved away. Her mother started dating a guy who she honestly hated and can be a bit misogynist, and the only hope in her life, Rachel Amber, went missing. Aki was isolated from any sort of positive human interactions, she was rejected by even her parents, and was made homeless until Divine took her in. As a side note, Chloe was pretty rebellious before she met Rachel Amber, at least according to the prequel story, and the introduction of this person, who in retrospect did use Chloe for her own means, did instill a means of acceptance. Meanwhile, Aki also had Divine come in and provide her acceptance and even a home. They were both considered what they were getting was love, and they were both being used. So while there are obvious differences between the two, to me there's enough parallels to compare the two characters. Their justification is pretty similar too, that the hand they were dealt was unfair. The world was unkind to them, to the point of psychological suffering and mental trauma, and the two are outcasts from their respective societies. They justify their actions because of this. Well, to be honest, the problem with Chloe is that her bad behavior isn't really addressed. The biggest issue with Chloe's character development is that she doesn't really have development for most of the game. There's a heel turn at the end of the story, just for the sake of convenience for the story. Meanwhile, Aki shows regret for her actions, and it takes the reach of multiple people for her to come to terms that she is loved and cared for by others, that she isn't alone. What I'm saying is that in comparison, there's a lot more development for Aki, even if it's a little rushed. At least there was an attempt at it. But the biggest issues I have is that Chloe is a manipulator. Yeah, throughout the story of Life is Strange, she depends a good portion of it basically guilt-tripping her friend Max to use her powers of time manipulation to help her find Rachel.
Don't even answer. We have places to go and people to do. Come on, before Mom starts some more shit. Let's bail.
It's Kate Marsh from Blackwell.
Big whoop. You don't call me once in 5 years and now you're all over some biatch you see every day at school? I see how you roll. So go ahead, chat up Kate Marsh from Blackwell. I've got other people to hang out with too.
Kate, please.
Oh, Max, I know you want to help me. I love that you stepped up to David, but it doesn't matter now. Nothing matters.
Yes, Kate Marsh almost killed herself. Such sad, okay? That doesn't make me feel any better about my fucked up life. Get it?
There are other times where Chloe puts down Max, like in episode 2 where the two are being confronted by Frank, Chloe's drug dealer, and Max has the option to shoot Frank, or attempt to anyway.
That is hilarious. Oh, man.
And what does Chloe do?
You really stood your ground.
I freaked. I don't like guns.
It'll be hard to keep Nathan off my ass. My step-shit will have his other gun sealed in an electrified bunker by now.
Sorry, Chloe. I've never held a gun on a human being before. Not cool.
I know, Max. Really. I'm actually relieved it worked out this way instead.
Not shooting a guy and getting a gun that isn't even yours taken off isn't a reason to get mad at anyone, especially when the situation was that escalated by Chloe. And one more instance and we'll move on. So in episode 3, there's a part where Chloe and David get into an argument. A can choose to side with either of them. Chloe's determined to split her mother Joyce and David up. Let's be honest, she isn't exactly subtle about this.
Treating me and my mom like we're your family platoon!
Hey, leave Joyce out of this.
I wish you'd leave Joyce, like now!
Nope.
Yeah, she has her reasons. and some of them I agree with. But she certainly isn't helping the situation. Stealing his guns, bringing weed and drugs into the house, stealing money. Yes, David is paranoid. He does shitty things, like recording people on security cams. But her mother is happy with him, and things wouldn't be as terrible if Chloe even put even the smallest amount of efforts into this. Like, not stealing and not doing drugs. She decides, however, to cause as much shit as possible. When I did my research for my first video on the game, I saw a lot of people wondering why there's even an option here to side with David. It's rather confusing since the game does give you a reason, and that's because of Joyce. Max seems to realize how much David means to her.
Maybe I went too easy on David for Joyce's sake. I hope Joyce doesn't hate me for tearing into David.
This is probably a reason why there's an option to side with David. If you do, Chloe sulks, therefore making Max feel guilty for another reasonable decision. Since while you can disagree with someone's methods and personality, Chloe and David have an ultimate goal of trying to find Rachel Amber and the culprit, who was last seen with Chloe's drug dealer, whom she owes money to. To be frank, by siding with David, you're just showing that you're being open-minded and trying to at least unite the two with a common enemy/goal. Not helped while Chloe gets on David's case with his shady investigation, she conveniently ignores the breaking and entering and looking over private documents the game just had us do. Chloe legitimately only thinks of herself and manipulates Max as a puppet, guilt-tripping her if she even so much as disagrees with her. Chloe at times came off as deceptive as Divine, people who only want to manipulate others for their own gain. The only difference is Chloe isn't a snappy dresser as Divine. She does have better hair though. Tragedy in fiction is a delicate balance, and a lot of times I feel that creators don't know how to use it properly. The reason why Aki works as a tragic character to me is because she actually grows as a character. Learning what she's doing isn't helping her, but only bearing her deeper into the darkness that consumed her life. Meanwhile, Chloe only makes the situation worse for herself and uses her tragic life as a crutch to justify her bad actions while never looking inward for any self-reflection. I'm not gonna pretend that the writing for Aki is perfect. There's a reason why I'm still writing up a script where my issues with her writing in the later half of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5d's is terrible. Like, fuck you, Crow! But in terms of backstory and development of her character, she certainly is a cut above Chloe to me. And at the same time, was considered one of the most popular characters in the show of Yu-Gi-Oh! And series at all times. Aki's lasting popularity is due to her sympathetic backstory and development, good looks, and overall interesting deck theme that made her a fan favorite overnight. Even more so that last year, her signature card, the Black Rose Dragon, was the first of the Signer Dragons outside of Yusei's and Jack's that actually got an upgrade. But yeah, I like Aki, and dislike Chloe, and I fucking hate Crow. But before you wrap this up, I want to be concise for once in my damn life. Mental traumas and seeing characters in fiction may be enthralling to watch and see how they develop in a story, but I think it would behoove me to say that you actually know someone who is being abused or manipulated by someone, that you should obviously get help to deal with it. These are real world issues, and it happens every day. If someone you know is going through this, and you see no one doing anything, you be the one to reach out to them, and get people you can trust to help you to do this in the least painful way possible. Thank you for listening. I'm MangaKamen, and remember to examine your fandom.